Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge, you're in the home stretch. Some of us are way beyond bedtime. I just I snuck out and did a good night call with my kids, and my 7-year-old was so groggy. He asked what I was up to, and I told him, and he said he was curious if you were scared of poisonous spiders. I will protect you from having to answer his question. Michael Lee already asked you about Sharpies, so we want to ask you about your phobias related to the outdoors. I'd like to talk a little bit about the First Amendment. I'm worried about the liberal project in the grand sense. I think what's happening on campuses right now is really dangerous, and I think what happens on campus will probably not stay on campus. We've got lots of data that shows high school kids don't know our history, don't know basic civics. One of the most frightening numbers is that Americans under 35, 41% of them tell pollsters they think the First Amendment is dangerous because you might be able to use your free speech to say something that would hurt someone else's feelings. So I would love to explore a little bit where we are in the First Amendment. So can we go to history first? What's the core purpose of the First Amendment? Why do we have it?
We protect it so individuals can express their views in speech and in writing. The idea is that there's no such thing as a true idea that's dictated from above or by the government, and that individuals can say what they think in speech and writing and help. It's both an individual idea that they can express their own opinions and their own beliefs, and it's also, I think there's also an idea that truth develops through debate and more informed judgment. The more perfect union develops through debate when we have different perspectives that are shared. And a lot of ideas began as unpopular ideas, and then they take hold over time, and it's important to protect the ability of people to speak both for their individual rights and for the idea of the betterment of society over time through debate and improvement, more perfect union.
Thanks. I'm encouraged. I was hoping that we'd hear both sides of that. We need a First Amendment because it's required for individual liberty, and we need it structurally because society, and particularly a republic, needs that discourse. Aristotle thought you never really have a great idea of what you think if it's just bouncing around inside your head. It needs to be dialogue with others, and a free republic, a free people need that debate to advance a structure of liberty. Why are there 5 freedoms in the First Amendment? Why do we have speech, press, religion, assembly, protest, redress of grievances? Why wouldn't we have a different amendment for each one? Why isn't there just free speech and maybe the 2 clauses of religion, but why are they all together in an amendment? And this is not supposed to be some grand gotcha question. I'm actually just abusing you for private tutorial right now.
I think the rights, when they got to New York in 1789, and James Madison, after going through the ratifying conventions and getting a lot of heat, frankly, for why isn't there protection in a Bill of Rights, something that George Mason and others who were concerned about with the original Constitution. So when they got to New York, he was busy working on this, writing out a draft of the rights that he thought should be protected in a Bill of Rights, and drew on a lot of the state constitutions. I know I've talked with Senator Kennedy about some of that, and I don't have a clear answer for why the grouping ended up in that fashion.
Well, is it fair to say that if we didn't have a First Amendment, would people not have these rights? I mean, wasn't the Constitution completed without a Bill of Rights because we don't think government gives us rights? We have rights because people are created by God with dignity, and so the rights they belong to people because of the nature of humans, and humans are created in the image of God, and they have dignity, and so the Constitution stops before the Bill of Rights, and then the Bill of Rights sort of clarifies a whole bunch of things that we believe about people, and when you run through them, it's kind of amazing that we end at the 9th and 10th Amendment, which in a way, what the 9th Amendment, 9th and 10th, I want you to tell me what they mean, but if I'm teaching it to my kids, what I say the 9th and 10th Amendment mean is, oh, you don't actually need a list that might end, because if you think that you only have the rights that government decrees for you, then you might think where the government stops talking, you don't have any more rights. And it seems to me what the 9th and 10th Amendment say, oh, by the way, if we don't have a list of rights that continues, you still have all the ones we didn't name. And state and local governments, if the federal government hasn't said this is a power uniquely enumerated for the federal government, states and locals, you're the only governments that still have these remaining powers. Is that fair, or correct me?
I think one of the ideas at the convention, and they did talk a bit about Bill of Rights there, or individual rights, and they do have some in Article 1, Section 9, Article 1, Section 10. We forget those rights. I hate to take an aside here, but I want to underscore the ex post facto Bill of Attainder provisions are critical to individual liberty. Ex post facto is the very definition of a tyrannical government, when what you did yesterday is made illegal tomorrow and you're punished for what you did yesterday when it wasn't illegal then. And so those were some of the foundational individual liberties. But the idea I think they had, and it was maybe a bit of a political miscalculation at the convention, was because the federal government was only given certain specified powers, we didn't need to put in a Bill of Rights because the federal government wouldn't have the power to do these kinds of things in the first place. Well, that didn't go over so great in some of the ratifying conventions, and some of the promises that were made were, instead of amending the existing structure, let's get to work as soon as we get to New York in 1789 on a Bill of Rights. And there were a variety of discussions, and so that's what Madison did when they got there in 1789. So I think your point is correct with respect to thinking about where rights come from, but I think in the practical politics of the day, the initial idea was the federal government won't have the power to do that, and then people said, what are you talking about? There's lots of powers in this Constitution. Even if you think that, let's belt and suspenders and make sure that the federal government can't infringe these core liberties, which are part of what we think are fundamental to being an American.
Why is there not an exception written into the First Amendment against hate speech? What is hate speech, and who gets to decide what it is?
Senator, I think the principle of free speech that the framers put into the Constitution encompassed the idea that there would be, as the Supreme Court has subsequently said, in a variety of cases, unpopular ideas that would be expressed, and that, as we said earlier, it's important for individual liberty to have the ability to express your thoughts and your words, and it's important for societal development, the development of America, for the people to be able to express their ideas so that we can improve over time. And a lot of the ideas we hold dear were unpopular, some of them not so long ago, and we developed those ideas over time, and part free speech helps us build a better America.
Yeah, if we had to unpack American political philosophy in one word, I think it's anti-majoritarianism. Mm-hmm. And you never would want the majority to get to define what the minority can't hold in an unpopular position. The chairman's going to take my gavel, but take my microphone. But I would love to ask you if speech can ever be called violent. But I'm not at that.
I will just add one sentence: the anti-majoritarianism point. We think of the individual liberties specified in the Constitution as supporting that, but the structure, as I made clear, the structure, the separation of powers and federalism is part of that same overall idea, which is protection of individual liberty against majoritarian rule, and the whole document tilts toward liberty.
Thanks.